How's it going, everyone? This is Jack here with the Commander's Wire, and welcome back to another video. We're going to be going over another positional group of potential free agents that the Commanders could be looking towards in this year's free agency cycle. But before we get into the video, I'd really appreciate it if you guys went down below, dropped a like, subscribe, turned on post notifications to know when I post next, and you guys will be notified whenever I drop more Commanders content just like this. We're going to be going over the defensive tackle position today. I split these up into some day one starters as well as some potential rotational pieces, and I'll probably get into that more as I go into each player. But the reason I did that is because even though, as far as we know, Daron Payne is going to play out the rest of his contract, the offseason is still very young. It hasn't even started for some teams yet, and a lot of things can change. So Daron Payne could still get traded this offseason. He could get extended. He could get his contract adjusted. We really don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to go under the assumption that Daron Payne is still going to be on the team. However, there's a possibility that he could get potentially traded. So I'm going to just be going over a couple of defensive tackle free agents that fit both of those scenarios. Let's get right into the first defensive tackle. It's going to be a very big name, being John Franklin Myers with the Denver Broncos. He stands at 6'4", 288 pounds. He's just 29 years old. And this season for the Broncos, he had 25 total tackles, 12 solo, 7.5 sacks, and 3.5 run stuff. So I think his stats really speak for themselves. He was a big reason why the Broncos defense was as good as it was this year, and I really expect him to get a big contract extension with the Broncos, and I would really not allow him to even test out free agency. So I put him on the list just because of who he was. However, I really don't see a scenario where the Commanders are going to land him this offseason. Next up is going to be another kind of day one starter, being Sheldon Rankins. He's formerly with the Houston Texans. He stands at 6'2", 305 pounds. He's 31 years old, a former first-round pick, and this year for the Texans, he had 35 total tackles, 15 of those being solo, 3 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 6.5 run stuffs. So I think that he'd be a very, very solid defensive tackle for the Washington Commanders. We all saw how that defensive unit was for the Houston Texans, and Sheldon Rankins definitely played a big role in the run game. So I think if he were to leave Houston and come to a team like the Washington Commanders, I think he'd be a very solid addition and probably a day one starter. I don't know if that would be the case if Daron Payne is still on the team. However, we'll just have to see. If Daron Payne is still on the team, I really don't see a scenario where Sheldon Rankins is brought to the Washington Commanders. But if Daron Payne is potentially traded, we could make a splash and sign a guy like Sheldon Rankins if he is in free agency and does not get extended with the Houston Texans. Next up is going to be another guy that I'm very high on, and that's going to be Sebastian Joseph Day. He is a 6'4", 310-pound defensive tackle, formerly with the Titans. He is 30 years old, a former 6th-round pick. And this year for the Titans, he had 41 total tackles, 22 of those being solo. He had 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 9.5 run stuffs. I think Sebastian Joseph Day would be a very solid defensive tackle to add to this defensive tackle room, and that top 3 of Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, and Sebastian Joseph Day would be a very scary trio, and especially with Johnny Newton coming in at that 4 spot and maybe even a rookie coming in at the 5 spot. I think that'd be a very, very solid defensive tackle room, and that rotation would be very scary all the way around the ball, whether it's on running downs, on passing downs. It'd be a very solid unit, and this could definitely be a guy to watch in free agency here in a couple weeks. I'm going to start getting into some more rotational guys. I'm going to start out with DJ Reader. He stands at 6'3", 330 pounds. He's a 31-year-old defensive tackle, formerly with the Detroit Lions. He's a former 5th-round pick. This year with the Lions, he had 28 total tackles, 11 of those being solo and 2 run stuffs. He definitely is not a day one starter for the Washington Commanders, but he'll be a solid rotational piece. He'll be a veteran that will hopefully help Johnny Newton to continue to develop. Johnny Newton could definitely become a solid pass rushing defensive tackle in the NFL, but he just needs some more development. I think that with Eric Henderson, our new D-line coach, being hired, and especially with Aaron Donald, of all people, being very high on him and crediting Eric Henderson with Aaron Donald's success, I think that Johnny Newton could continue to develop, and with another veteran presence like DJ Reader being a rotational defensive tackle, we'll have a very well-rounded defensive tackle room. And I think DJ Reader will come at a pretty cheap cost as well. Next up, another Detroit Lion, and that's going to be Levi Onwuzurike. He's a 6'3", 304-pound defensive tackle. He's 27 years old, a second-round pick formerly in 2021, and he is unfortunately on the physically unable to perform list, so he did not play this entire season. However, in 2024, he had 28 total tackles, 16 solo, 1.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 3.5 run stuffs. So I think Levi Onwuzurike would be a solid defensive tackle to add to the Washington Commanders. Because he had this injury, a lot of teams may be turned off to him, and that would allow the Washington Commanders to get a solid defensive tackle, assuming that he's going to come back even 75% of what he did in 2024. He'd be a very solid defensive tackle and one for very cheap. And lastly on this list, I have a Los Angeles Charger named Da'Shawn Hand. He stands at 6'3", 302 pounds. He is 30 years old, former 4th round pick, and this year for the Chargers, he had 29 total tackles, 18 of those being solo, 1.5 sacks. He had recorded an interception as well as 6.5 run stuffs. I think that he'd be another solid rotational defensive tackle. He's not getting after the quarterback as good as I would like, so I think that he would just be a solid rotational piece, whether it be on early downs, on later downs. It really doesn't matter. He play on every down and would be a solid number 3 defensive tackle behind Javon Kinlaw and Daron Payne. My personal opinion is that I believe that Daron Payne is going to stay for the 2026 season. I think that he is, like it was reported, play out the rest of his contract, and that means that the Washington Commanders could be looking for more rotational defensive tackles, whether it's on early downs being some more big body run stuffing defensive tackles, or on later downs a little bit lighter guys, maybe a little taller, that can get after the quarterback on passing downs. I think Johnny Newton fits that role, and if he's able to continue to develop, like I said before, I think he'd be a very, very solid defensive tackle for us and potentially being in the starting rotation for the Washington Commanders. I think Daron Payne and Javon Kinlaw already do a great job, and they just really need another solid defensive tackle to sit behind Daron Payne and rotate in every once in a while. Javon Kinlaw going into last season, I really did not have high hopes, especially for how much money he was getting paid, but I think that he did just a good enough job in order to justify the contract he was getting. Besides that one injury, he was really on the field a lot with Daron Payne, so I think that those two, along with another rotational defensive tackle, maybe another veteran, or even a young guy to step up besides Johnny Newton, as well as a couple additions at defensive end, I think we'll have a very, very solid defensive line as a whole unit. So that is going to be it for today's video. I only had 6 defensive tackles. There definitely are a lot more free agents to look for. However, these are just a couple names that I wanted to highlight. Let me know down in the comments. Are these guys players you want the Washington Commanders to sign? Would you guys want them to sign some of the top names and trade Daron Payne, or do you guys want them to sign more of a rotational defensive tackle 3 or 4 and keep Daron Payne? Just let me know down in the comments. This is the end of today's video. I really do appreciate you guys watching to the very end. And while you guys are dropping a comment down there, I would appreciate it if you guys also dropped a like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I really do appreciate it, and it lets me know that you guys want more Commanders content just like this. Thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and hail to the Commanders.